They tried to push Zola Ndlovu away from the gates. Her worn shoes scraped against polished marble as security blocked her path, their eyes filled with quiet disgust. Inside, cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and the city's most powerful people gathered to celebrate a billion-dollar foundation. "She doesn't belong here," someone whispered. Zola lowered her gaze and turned to leave. Then, 3 black luxury cars screeched to a stop. The doors opened. 3 of the most powerful young men in South Africa stepped out and froze when they saw her. Mother. The word shattered the air. And before anyone could react, they dropped to their knees. Before we continue, where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? If stories like this move you, take a second to subscribe. You're part of this journey too. Many years earlier, long before cameras would flash in her face and powerful men would kneel before her, Zola Ndlovu was just another invisible girl in the outer edges of Johannesburg. She lived in a settlement where the roads were never truly roads, only long scars of dust and broken stones. In the dry season, the wind lifted sand into people's eyes and food pots. In the rainy season, the paths turned to mud so deep that children sometimes lost their sandals in it. Tin roofs rattled all night when storms came. Smoke from charcoal stoves clung to the air. Water had to be carried. Electricity came and went like a moody visitor. The rich drove past that part of the city with their windows closed. Zola was 22, though hardship had already pressed a deeper age into her face. She was slim and dark-skinned, with serious eyes that seemed always to be thinking one thought ahead of pain. Every morning before sunrise, she stood beside a rusted oil drum that served as her stove and fried vetkoek to sell near a taxi rank. By mid-morning, if she sold enough, she went to wash other people's clothes by hand. At night, she returned to the one-room shack she rented from a landlord, who reminded her every week that kindness did not pay rent. Her life had narrowed into numbers. How much flour was left? How much cooking oil could still be stretched? How many coins sat in the cracked blue mug under her bed? How many days until rent was due again? There had once been other dreams. When she was younger, she had imagined training as a nurse. She used to stop outside clinics and hospitals and watch women in clean uniforms move with purpose, saving lives, calming fear, carrying themselves, as if the world could not easily push them aside. But after her mother died of a fever that should have been treated sooner, and after her father disappeared into drink and silence before vanishing from her life altogether, dreams became a luxury she could not afford. Still, Zola had something many people around her had lost: a stubborn tenderness. Even on the days when she barely sold enough to eat, she would break a piece of bread for a barefoot child hovering too long near her stall. If an old woman's bucket tipped over at the communal tap, Zola would stop to help even when she was late. If a stranger cried openly on the roadside, she did not turn her face away. Poverty had made many people hard, and no one blamed them for it. But somehow, in Zola, suffering had not killed softness. It had only made it quieter. That evening, the air felt different from the start. The sky hung low and bruised with clouds. The taxi rank had been unusually tense all afternoon. 2 men got into a fight over change. A woman selling tomatoes muttered that bad luck was walking the streets. By sunset, business had slowed. Zola packed up the last of her unsold vetkoek in an old cloth and counted her earnings under the weak light of a street lamp. The coins felt insultingly light in her palm. Not enough for rent, not enough for flour, not enough for anything except one more day of postponing disaster. When she reached her room, she found the landlord waiting outside with his arms crossed over his chest. Mr. Maseko was a thick-set man with small eyes and a voice that always sounded bored, as though the suffering of poor tenants interrupted more important thoughts. He looked at her without greeting. "You are late," he said. Zola tightened her grip on the cloth bundle in her hands. "I was working. You are also behind. I know. You said that last week." She swallowed. "Please, give me until Saturday. I will sell more by then." He clicked his tongue and glanced at the door of her shack. Saturday. "After that, I do not want stories. I want money." "I understand. You always understand." He stepped closer. "Understanding has never paid me." He walked off before she could answer. Zola stood very still until his footsteps faded. Only then did she open her door, set down her things, and let herself sit on the edge of the bed. The mattress sank sharply beneath her. Her room smelled of soap, old dampness, and exhaustion. For a long time, she stared at the wall. Then she rose, lit a candle, and ate half of one cold vet coke with water. She saved the other half for morning. Outside, the wind began to rise, pushing dust under the door. The night might have ended like every other desperate night, quiet, hungry, and forgettable if not for the sound. At first, Zola thought it was a cat. A small, strained cry drifted through the darkness and vanished again beneath the wind. She paused with one hand on the candle. The settlement was full of wandering animals and drunken arguments and children who should have been indoors but rarely were. She told herself to stay where she was. Then it came again. Not a cat. A baby. Zola stood at once. She moved to the door and listened. The cry was thin, almost swallowed by the storm building overhead. It came from somewhere farther down the path beyond the row of shacks near the old clinic that had closed 2 years earlier after a roof collapse and corruption scandal. No one used that building now. People said bad things lingered there, failed treatments, stolen medicines, unpaid workers, ghosts if one believed in such things. Children dared each other to run to the gate and back at night. The cry came a third time. Zola did not think any more. She grabbed her shawl, shielded the candle with her hand, then blew it out and stepped into the dark. The path was rough and uneven. The first drops of rain had begun to fall, fat and cold. Wind tugged at her skirt as she hurried past sleeping shacks and leaning fences. A dog barked once, then retreated. The settlement seemed to hold its breath around her. The clinic stood at the edge of a weed-filled lot, its broken windows black against the sky. Another cry. This time it was joined by a second, then a third. Zola stopped so suddenly her foot slid in the mud. For one stunned moment all she could do was listen. 3 babies. Her heart began to pound. The rusted front gate of the clinic hung crooked on one hinge. She pushed it open with a screech that made her flinch. The weeds around the path were waist-high and wet. Rain thickened. Somewhere metal banged against metal in the wind. Zola wrapped the shawl tighter around herself and moved toward the side entrance where the cries seemed strongest. "Hello," she called softly, though she did not know who she was calling for. "Who is there?" No answer. Only the cries, weak, now trembling urgent. The side door had long since rotted at the bottom. She pushed it with both hands. It gave way into a corridor that smelled of mold, dust, and abandonment. Moonlight leaked through holes in the roof. Papers littered the floor, damp and yellowed. Zola moved carefully, one hand against the wall, every nerve alive. Then she saw it. Near the end of the corridor, beside a collapsed waiting bench, sat a large woven laundry basket covered with a faded blanket. And it was moving. Zola rushed forward and dropped to her knees. With shaking hands, she pulled back the blanket. Inside lay 3 newborn babies pressed close together for warmth. Their faces were tiny and drawn with hunger. One had a thin blue cap slipping over one eye. Another was wrapped in a towel that was already damp through. The third's little fists opened and closed against the cold night air. Their cries were weaker now, not because they were calmer, but because they were running out of strength. For a second, the whole world went silent inside Zola. Rain tapped through the broken roof. Wind hissed through the corridor. And there, in the basket, life itself trembled before her, unwanted, unprotected, and waiting to see whether anyone on this earth would claim it. A folded paper lay tucked beside them. Zola snatched it up and opened it. The writing was hurried, uneven, almost desperate. "Please forgive me. I cannot do this. Save them. Nothing else. No names. No date. No explanation." Zola looked back at the babies. One had begun to shiver. Another rooted weakly at the towel near his mouth, searching for milk that was not there. The smallest one let out a sound so frail it barely seemed human. "Oh God," she whispered. She had no milk, no money, no husband, no family to call, no room in her life for one child, let alone 3. And yet as she looked at them soaked by rain, leaking through a broken roof in a dead clinic where someone had left them like forgotten parcels, one truth rose in her with terrible clarity. If she walked away, they might not live until morning. Zola slipped off her shawl and wrapped it around the basket, tucking the cloth gently around their tiny bodies. Then she gathered the basket to her chest. It was heavier than she expected, but not heavier than the feeling settling over her heart. Outside, thunder rolled across the night. Zola stepped back into the rain, carrying all 3 babies toward the life that was about to change forever. The rain followed Zola all the way back. By the time she reached her shack, her skirt clung to her legs, her hands trembled from the cold, and the basket felt heavier with every step. not because of its weight, but because of what it now meant. Inside the room was as small and bare as ever. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. Zola closed the door with her foot and placed the basket carefully on the bed. The babies whimpered, their cries softer, now thinner, dangerously thin. She lit the candle with shaking fingers, shielding the flame from the draft. Warm light flickered across their tiny faces. 3 lives. 3 fragile, helpless lives. Zola stood there, staring. Her mind began to race. You cannot do this. You can barely feed yourself. If you keep them, you will all starve. The voice of reason was loud, sharp, relentless. It sounded like every neighbor who had ever laughed at her, every landlord who had threatened her, every stranger who had reminded her of her place. But there was another voice, too. Quieter. Softer. Harder to ignore. If you don't, who will? One of the babies let out a weak cry, then coughed a tiny broken sound that seemed to tear through her chest. Zola dropped to her knees beside the bed. Hey. Hey, little ones, she whispered, though her voice trembled. You're not alone. I'm here. She didn't know if she was reassuring them or herself. Quickly, she looked around the room, searching for anything that could help. There was no milk. No baby clothes. No blankets except the thin one on her bed. No bottles. No plan. Only urgency. Zola grabbed an old plastic cup, poured a little water from her container, and mixed it with the smallest pinch of sugar she could spare. It wasn't enough. It wasn't right, but it was something. She tore a strip from a clean piece of cloth, dipped it into the mixture, and gently pressed it to the lips of the baby with the blue cap. At first nothing, then instinct. The baby sucked weakly. Relief hit Zola so suddenly she almost cried. That's it. Slowly, she murmured. You're strong. You're all strong. She repeated the process, with the other 2 moving carefully, patiently, as though any sudden motion might break them. Time blurred. The storm outside deepened. Water dripped through a crack in the roof. The candle burned lower. Zola did not move from the bed except to adjust the babies to check their breathing to keep them close. At some point, exhaustion crept into her bones. She leaned her head against the wall, the basket still within reach, her fingers resting lightly against the smallest child's chest, feeling for movement. What am I going to do? The question finally came heavy and unavoidable. Morning would come. People would see. Questions would be asked. Authorities might take the children away, or worse, accuse her of something she didn't do. In a place like this, truth did not always matter. She thought of going to the police. But she had already tried that before with smaller things, smaller injustices, and been turned away with shrugs and impatience. She thought of knocking on doors, asking for help. But she knew those doors, knew the faces behind them, knew the way people guarded their little resources with suspicion. She thought of leaving the babies somewhere better. A hospital, a church. The thought lasted only a second, because she had just come from a place where someone had done exactly that, and it had almost killed them. Zola closed her eyes, her chest tightened. For a long moment she sat in silence, listening to the uneven breathing of the 3 tiny lives beside her. Then slowly something inside her settled. Not comfort, not certainty, but a decision. She opened her eyes and looked at them again, really looked this time. You were left, she said softly, not because you are nothing, but because someone could not carry what they should have carried. Her voice steadied. I don't know how to do this. I don't even know where to start. She let out a quiet breath. But I will not leave you. The words hung in the air. Once spoken, they could not be taken back. Zola shifted, sitting straighter now, as if accepting a weight she had already begun to carry. She reached into the basket and gently lifted the smallest baby into her arms. He was so light it frightened her. His skin was warm but fragile, his breathing uneven. She held him closer. You need names, she whispered. It felt important, necessary, like anchoring them to the world. She looked at the first baby, the one with the blue cap. You, she said, her voice softening. You will be Sifo, because you are a gift. The baby stirred slightly, as if responding. She turned to the second, whose tiny hands kept curling into fists. And you, Thabo, because there must be joy in your life. There must be. Finally, she looked at the third, the quietest one, the one who seemed to conserve every ounce of energy. And you. Zola paused, swallowing emotion. Lunga. Because your life will be long. It has to be. Saifo, Thabo, Lunga. 3 names spoken into a room that had never held such hope before. Zola drew them closer together, wrapping them in her only blanket and her shawl. The cold pressed in from all sides, but she used her own body heat to shield them as best she could. Outside, the storm began to ease. Inside, a different storm had just begun. Morning came too quickly. A pale, unforgiving light crept through the gaps in the walls. Zola had not slept. Her eyes burned, her limbs ached, but she forced herself to stand. There was no time to be tired. She needed milk, real milk. She wrapped the babies tightly and secured them in the basket again. Carrying them would draw attention, but leaving them behind was not an option. As she stepped outside, the settlement was already waking. Women swept their doorways. Children ran barefoot through puddles. Men gathered near the corner, talking loudly about nothing and everything. It didn't take long. The first person to notice was a woman named Namsa, who sold vegetables 2 shacks down. "What is that?" Namsa asked, narrowing her eyes. Zola didn't stop walking. "Nothing. That is not nothing," Namsa said, stepping closer. She pulled back the cloth slightly and gasped. "Zola, whose babies are these?" The question spread faster than fire. Within minutes people had gathered. 3. Where did she get them? She cannot even feed herself. This girl has lost her mind. Zola felt their eyes on her, judging, calculating, waiting for a mistake. "I found them," she said simply. "Found," a man scoffed. "Children are not coins you find on the road. They were left at the old clinic." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Then leave them at a hospital," someone said. "Or give them to social workers. Why are you carrying trouble into your life?" Zola tightened her grip on the basket. "They were already left once. And what makes you think you can save them?" Nomza demanded. Zola met her gaze. "I don't know if I can," she said honestly. The crowd fell quiet for a second. Then the whispers returned louder, sharper. "She will fail. They will die with her. This is foolishness." Zola felt the weight of their doubt press against her. But she did not move. "I am not asking for your permission," she said quietly. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried something stronger than volume. "I am asking for milk. If anyone has extra." Silence. People shifted, looked away, clutched their own small supplies a little tighter. Finally, an older woman stepped forward, thin, slow, but steady. Gogo Dlamini. She looked into the basket, then at Zola. "You will not survive this alone," she said. "I know." Gogo Dlamini nodded once. "Wait here." She turned and walked away. The crowd watched, confused. Minutes later, she returned with a small tin of powdered milk. Not much, but enough to matter. Zola's eyes filled instantly. "Thank you," she whispered. Gogo Dlamini handed it to her without ceremony. "This is not enough," the old woman said. "But it is a beginning." Zola nodded. And in that moment, standing in the middle of a crowd that doubted her, holding 3 fragile lives and 1 small act of kindness, she understood something clearly. This would not be easy. It would not be fair. It might even break her. But she had already chosen, and there was no turning back. The first weeks nearly broke her. Zola did not measure time in days anymore. She measured it in feedings, in cries, in moments of silence that felt more frightening than noise. Morning blurred into afternoon, afternoon into night, and night into another fragile beginning. Saifo cried the loudest. Thabo fought his hunger with restless movements, his small body always twisting as if searching for something more. Lunga was the quiet one, and that terrified Zola the most. Quiet could mean peace, or it could mean fading. Zola learned quickly that survival was not a single act, but 1,000 small decisions made every hour. She woke before dawn not because she had rested, but because one of the babies needed her. She mixed powdered milk with water as carefully as she could, stretching the tin Gogo Dlamini had given her. Each scoop felt like a calculation between today and tomorrow. When the milk ran low, she diluted it slightly, then slightly more. Each time, guilt tightened in her chest. Is this enough? Will they grow? Will they survive this? She had no answers, only hope and work. During the day, she still had to earn something. That meant strapping the babies close to her body, one tied to her chest, another secured against her back, and the third resting in a makeshift sling she carried with one arm. Her movements became slower, heavier, but more deliberate. At the taxi rank, people stared. Some laughed. "You have turned yourself into a nursery," one man joked loudly. Another shook his head. "3, you couldn't even keep one man. Now you want to keep 3 children." Laughter followed. Zola said nothing. She set up her small stove, lit the fire, and began frying vetkoek. The oil hissed as dough met heat. The familiar rhythm steadied her. It was one of the few things in her life she could still control. Customers came and went, some ignoring the babies, others staring openly. A young woman leaned closer one morning. "Are they yours?" she asked. Zola did not look up. "They are mine now." The woman studied her for a moment, then nodded once before walking away. Not everyone mocked, but kindness was rare and never enough to make things easy. By midday, the heat pressed down heavily. The babies grew restless. Saifo began to cry, his voice sharp and insistent. Zola shifted him gently, rocking him while still working with one hand. "Just a little more," she murmured. "We'll go soon." But soon was always delayed by necessity. She needed every coin, every single one. When business slowed, she packed up quickly and returned home, her arms aching, her back stiff from carrying them all day. Inside the shack, the air felt even smaller, now filled with the sounds of breathing, crying, and constant need. She fed them again, changed them with cloth she washed and reused, checked their foreheads for fever, listened to their chests, watched, always watched. At night, sleep came in fragments. 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there. Never enough to restore anything. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in dull orange, all 3 babies began to cry at once. Zola froze. She had learned to handle 1, sometimes 2, but 3 at the same time. It was overwhelming. Sifo's cries were sharp and urgent. Thabo's were angry, almost rhythmic. Lunga's were soft but continuous, like a fading echo. Zola moved quickly, lifting one then the other, trying to soothe them in turns. Her hands trembled. Her breath quickened. "It's okay. It's okay," she repeated, though nothing seemed to calm them. The room felt too small, too hot, too loud. Her heart pounded harder with every passing second. "Please, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. She tried feeding them again. They refused. She checked their bodies. No visible injury, no obvious cause. But the crying did not stop. It grew. It pressed into her ears, into her chest, into her thoughts, until it felt like she might break apart under the weight of it. For one terrifying moment, Zola stepped back. Her hands dropped to her sides. Her breathing turned shallow. The thought came fast and brutal. "You cannot do this." It was louder than before. Stronger. "You are failing them." Her eyes filled with tears. The cries continued. Relentless. Unforgiving. And then, a knock. Sharp. Unexpected. Zola turned toward the door, her mind still spinning. Another knock. She moved quickly and pulled it open. Gogo Dlamini stood there. The older woman's eyes took in everything at once, the crying babies, Zola's shaking hands, the exhaustion etched into her face. Without a word, Gogo stepped inside. "Give me one," she said calmly. Zola hesitated only a second before handing over Thabo. Gogo held him with practiced ease, adjusting her grip, humming softly under her breath. The sound was low, steady, familiar in a way Zola didn't understand but instantly felt. Thabo's cries began to soften. Zola started. "How children know when they are not alone," Gogo said simply. She moved to sit on the edge of the bed, still humming. Now the others. Zola picked up Sifo and Lunga, holding them close, trying to mirror the calm she saw in Gogo. Slowly, painfully, slowly, the crying eased. Sifo's voice dropped to small whimpers. Lunga's breathing steadied. Silence, fragile but real, filled the room. Zola sank to the floor, her body suddenly too heavy to hold upright. "I almost," she began, then stopped. Gogo looked at her. "You almost gave up." It wasn't a question. Zola nodded, tears slipping down her face. I thought I was killing them," she whispered. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be this everything they need." Gogo's expression softened, but her voice remained firm. "No one knows at the beginning." Zola let out a shaky breath. "But what if I fail?" Gogo shifted, slightly adjusting Thabo in her arms. "Then you will learn, and you will try again." Zola shook her head. And if that is not enough, Gogo held her gaze. "Love is not always enough to make things easy," she said, "but it is what makes you stay when everything tells you to leave." The words settled deeply. Zola looked at the babies again, at their small chests, rising and falling at their fragile but present lives. "I am so tired," she admitted. "I know. I am scared all the time. I know." Zola wiped her face with the back of her hand. "But I cannot leave them." Gogo nodded once. "Then you are already stronger than you think." The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. Not empty, not heavy, just still. After a while, Gogo stood carefully handing Thabo back to Zola. "I will come again tomorrow," she said. Zola looked up surprised. "You don't have to, I know," Gogo replied. And that was the end of it. She moved to the door, pausing only once. "This will not get easier," she added, "but you will get better." Then she left. Zola sat there for a long time after the door closed. The babies slept now, their faces peaceful in a way that felt almost miraculous. Zola leaned back against the wall, pulling them close. Her body ached, her eyes burned, her future remained uncertain, fragile, and frightening. But something had shifted. She was no longer standing alone in the storm. And even if the world still doubted her, even if every day ahead promised more struggle than relief, Zola made one thing certain in her heart. She would not let these children be abandoned again, no matter the cost. The day everything almost fell apart began like any other. Zola woke before sunrise, her body aching as if she had carried stones through the night instead of children. Sifo stirred first, letting out a soft cry that quickly grew stronger. Thabo followed, restless as always. Lunga opened his eyes but made no sound, his quiet gaze fixed on her face, as if trying to understand the world through her. "I'm here," Zola whispered, though her voice felt thinner than usual. She prepared the milk carefully, shaking the tin to measure what remained. Not much. The powder had started to cling to the corners, forming stubborn clumps that refused to dissolve easily. She scraped every bit she could. Today she would need to sell more. She had to. After feeding the babies and wrapping them securely, Zola stepped outside into the early morning chill. The settlement was already stirring smoke rising from cooking fires, voices drifting through narrow paths. She adjusted the cloth around her chest and back, balancing the weight of Sifo and Thabo, while Lunga rested in the sling at her side. "Today will be better," she murmured, more to herself than to them. At the taxi rank, the air buzzed with the usual chaos engines, revving drivers, shouting destinations, vendors calling out prices. Zola set up her small station and lit the stove. The flame flickered, then steadied. She began to work. The first few customers came quickly. That was a good sign. She moved faster, her hands shaping dough, flipping it into oil, watching it swell and turn golden. Coins clinked into her container. Hope small but real flickered inside her. Then it happened. A sharp voice cut through the noise. "Zola." She looked up. A well-dressed woman stood in front of her stall, her expression tight with anger. Zola recognized her immediately, Mrs. Kanisa, one of the few customers who always bought in bulk but never spoke kindly. "What is wrong, madam?" Zola asked cautiously. Mrs. Kanisa held up her purse. "My money is gone." The words landed heavily. Zola blinked. "I don't understand." "I stood here," the woman said, her voice rising, drawing attention. "I took out my wallet. I paid you. And now my money is gone." A small crowd began to gather. Zola's stomach tightened. "I only took what you gave me," she said quietly. The woman stepped closer. "Are you calling me a liar? No. Then where is my money? I don't know." The murmurs grew louder. "She has 3 children now," someone whispered. "She must be desperate." Desperate people steal. Zola felt the words hit her like stones. "I did not take anything," she said louder now. Mrs. Kanisa scoffed. "Of course you didn't. Who else would?" "Please check your bag again," she said. "Maybe I have already checked," the woman snapped. "You think I am a fool." The tension thickened. More people gathered. Phones appeared. Zola felt the ground beneath her shift, not physically, but in that terrible way where truth begins to lose its power in the face of accusation. "I swear," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I did not take your money." But her words sounded small against the growing noise. "Search her," someone suggested. Yes, search her, another agreed. Zola's heart dropped. She stepped back instinctively. No, she said. That single word made the crowd lean closer. Why not Mrs.? Kanisa demanded. Because I did nothing wrong. That is exactly what a thief would say. The babies stirred against her, sensing her distress. Sifo began to cry. Zola tightened her hold on them. Please, she said, her voice shaking now. Not in front of them. But the crowd was no longer listening. Hands reached forward. Someone grabbed her arm. Just check her pockets. Open the bag. It will be quick. Zola pulled back, panic rising in her chest. Don't touch me. The movement caused Lunga to slip slightly in the sling. Zola caught him quickly, her breath catching in her throat. Careful, she cried. But the crowd surged closer. Mrs. Kanisa crossed her arms. If you have nothing to hide, you will not resist. Zola looked around. Faces. So many faces. Some curious, some amused, some already convinced of her guilt. Not one stepping forward to stop it. Her chest tightened. Her vision blurred slightly. This was how it happened. Not with proof, not with truth, but with pressure. With noise. With enough people deciding something must be true. Please, she said again, softer now. No one listened. A hand reached toward her shawl. And then, stop. The voice cut cleanly through the chaos. Firm, controlled, unmoved by the crowd. Everyone turned. An older man stepped forward, his posture straight despite his age, his gaze sharp and unwavering. Mr. Mthembu. He was known in the area not because he was rich, but because he carried himself with a quiet authority that made people pause. What is happening here? He asked. Mrs. Kanyisa turned toward him. This girl has stolen my money. Mr. Mthembu looked at Zola. She shook her head, unable to speak. Then he looked back at the woman. Did you see her take it? No, but did anyone here see her take it? He asked, turning to the crowd. Silence. People shifted. Eyes dropped. That is not the point, Mrs. Kanyisa insisted. The money is gone. Mr. Mthembu nodded slowly. Yes, he said. And yet we are about to shame a woman in the street without proof. His gaze moved across the crowd. Is this who we are now? No one answered. He stepped closer to Zola's stall, his eyes scanning the area. Then he pointed. There. Everyone followed his gaze. Near the edge of the table, partially hidden beneath a folded cloth, lay a small stack of notes. Mrs. Kanyisa froze. Mthembu picked it up and held it out. Is this your missing money? The woman hesitated, then nodded stiffly. I must have misplaced it. A murmur spread through the crowd. Different now. Uncomfortable. Zola felt something inside her collapse. Not relief, not yet, but the release of a pressure she had not realized was suffocating her. Mr. Mthembu handed the money back. Then he turned to the crowd. We are quick to accuse, he said calmly, but slow to think. No one met his eyes. One by one, people began to step back. The energy shifted. Laughter faded. Phones lowered. The crowd dissolved as quickly as it had formed. Mrs. Kanisa avoided Zola's gaze. She began, then stopped. She turned and walked away. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. Zola stood there, her body still trembling. Mr. Mthembu looked at her for a moment. You must be careful, he said. Zola swallowed. I did nothing wrong. But that does not always protect you. He nodded once, then turned and left. Zola remained where she was, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Sifo's cries softened. Thabo shifted. Lunga remained quiet. Slowly, Zola exhaled. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to keep standing, to keep working, because she had no other choice. As she dropped another piece of dough into the oil, she realized something with painful clarity. Poverty was not just hunger. It was vulnerability. It meant your voice could be ignored. Your dignity could be questioned. Your truth could be doubted publicly, loudly, and without consequence. Zola glanced down at the 3 small lives depending on her. I will protect you, she whispered. Not just from hunger, but from a world that would try to define them before they had the chance to define themselves. The oil sizzled. The day moved forward, and Zola kept going. Because stopping had never been an option. Years did not pass all at once. They gathered slowly like dust, settling on everything Zola owned, quiet, constant, unavoidable. What had once been 3 fragile infants became 3 small boys who filled her one-room shack with movement questions and a kind of life she had never known before. Sifo was the first to sit up without support. Thabo was the first to crawl, fast, determined, and impossible to keep in one place. Lunga was the first to notice things others didn't. The way light fell through cracks in the wall, the sound of distant music, the small sadness in Zola's eyes when she thought no one was watching. Zola watched them grow with a mixture of wonder and fear. Every milestone felt like a victory. Every cough, every fever, every moment of unusual silence felt like a threat. She learned to read them without words. When Sifo went quiet, it meant he was thinking. When Thabo went quiet, it meant trouble. When Lunga went quiet, it meant something was wrong. She adapted her life around them completely. There were no more long hours at the taxi rank. Instead, she shifted to selling closer to home where she could run back quickly if needed. Her earnings dropped, but her presence increased, and for Zola, presence mattered more. Each morning she woke before them. She prepared the simplest meals she could, thin porridge, sometimes bread if she could afford it. Then she sat them together on the floor, their small legs crossed, their eyes still heavy with sleep. "Listen," she would say. It became their ritual, not lessons from books because there were no books, but lessons from life. "You do not take what is not yours," she told them one morning. Thabo frowned. "Even if we are hungry," Zola paused. The question hit deeper than he knew. "Yes," she said finally. "Even then." Sifo nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of it. Lunga looked at her quietly, as if trying to understand the feeling behind the words. "Another day," she said. "You help people when you can. Even if they don't help us?" Sifo asked. Zola smiled faintly. "Especially then. They did not always understand, but they listened. And over time, those small conversations began to shape something inside them. When they were old enough, Zola found a way to send them to the local school. It wasn't easy. Fees were low, but still too high. Uniforms were required, but she could only afford second-hand pieces patched and repatched until the fabric barely held. Shoes were optional, but even so, she had to choose carefully which of them would wear the one pair she managed to find. They took turns. No one complained. Not in front of her. On their first day, Zola walked them to the school herself. The building was worn, its paint peeling, its windows cracked in places. Children gathered in clusters, some laughing, others already forming the invisible lines of belonging and exclusion. Zola knelt in front of her boys. "Stay together," she said softly. "Always." Sifo nodded. Thabo grinned nervously. Lunga simply held her hand a moment longer. "Go," she whispered. They walked in, and for the first time since she found them, Zola felt something new, fear of losing them, not to death, but to a world larger than her arms could hold. School changed things. Sifo quickly showed signs of brilliance. He grasped lessons faster than others, his quiet focus turning into something teachers noticed. Thabo found his place in numbers. He counted everything, coins, steps, patterns, and often saw connections others missed. Lunga watched. He noticed the boy who never spoke, the girl who sat alone, the teacher who smiled differently at certain students. He felt things deeply, and sometimes that made the world heavier for him. But school also brought something else. Cruelty. It began subtly. A glance, a whisper, a laugh that came a second too late. "Where is your father?" one boy asked Sifo. Sifo said nothing. "Do you even have one?" another added. Thabo stepped forward. "We have a mother." The boy smirked. "One mother for 3 children, that is not normal." Laughter followed. Sifo clenched his fists but stayed silent. Lunga looked down. That day they came home quieter than usual. Zola noticed immediately. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing," Sifo replied. Thabo kicked a stone on the ground. Lunga sat down without speaking. Zola did not push. She had learned that silence sometimes needed space. Later that night, as she prepared their meal, Lunga spoke. "They say we are not real brothers." Zola paused. The fire crackled softly. "They say no one wanted us," he continued. The words hung in the air. Zola turned slowly. She walked over and knelt in front of them. "Look at me," she said. "They did. You are brothers," she said firmly. "Not because of blood, but because you stand together." She placed a hand over Sifo's chest. "Here." Then Thabo's. "Here." Then Lunga's. "Here. That is what matters." Thabo frowned. "But they laugh at us." Zola nodded. People laugh when they do not understand something. Saifo's voice was quiet. Will they stop? Zola held his gaze. No. The honesty surprised them. But one day, she continued, you will not need them to. Silence followed, not empty, but thoughtful. Zola pulled them closer. You do not answer cruelty with cruelty, she said. You answer it by becoming something stronger than it. Thabo sighed. That sounds difficult. Zola smiled faintly. It is. Days turned into months, months into years. The boys grew taller, stronger, sharper. Zola grew older, more tired, more lined with the quiet marks of sacrifice, but she never let them see everything. When she was hungry, she said she had already eaten. When she was exhausted, she said she was just resting. When she was afraid, she said nothing at all. One evening, as they sat together after a long day, Saifo looked at her carefully. Mama, he said. Zola's heart softened at the word. Yes, who are our real parents? The question came gently, but it landed heavily. Zola felt it settle deep inside her. She had known this moment would come. She had just hoped it would come later. She took a slow breath. I don't know, she said honestly. Thabo leaned forward. Did they leave us? Zola hesitated, then nodded. For reasons I cannot explain. Lunga's voice was barely above a whisper. Did they not love us? Zola reached for him immediately. No, she said firmly. Do not believe that. But they left us. Yes. Sometimes, she said slowly, people are not strong enough to carry what life gives them. She opened her eyes again. But that is not your fault. Saifo looked at her steadily. Do you regret taking us? The question struck deeper than anything else. Zola did not hesitate. Never. The word was immediate. Certain. Unshakable. I did not lose anything by choosing you, she continued. I found everything. The boys were quiet. Then slowly Thabo smiled. Sifo nodded. Lunga leaned into her side. And in that small room with its cracked walls and dim light, something invisible but powerful held them together. Not blood, not wealth, not certainty, but something stronger. Something chosen. Something built day by day through sacrifice, through love, through staying no matter how hard it became. Zola looked at them, her heart full and heavy at the same time. She had given them everything she had, and yet deep inside a quiet fear remained. One day the world would call them away, and she would have to let them go. By the time the boys reached their early teens, the world had already begun testing them in ways Zola could no longer shield. Childhood had been brief. Hunger had shaped them. Responsibility had sharpened them, but society would try to define them. At school, the differences became harder to ignore. Other boys arrived in clean uniforms, polished shoes, and with lunch packed neatly in containers. Saifo, Thabo, and Lunga came in, faded clothes, their collars worn thin, their shoes shared and mismatched. Some days they brought food. Other days they pretended they weren't hungry. At first the teasing had been small. Now it grew louder. You three again, one boy mocked one morning. Do you even live in a real house? It's probably just one bed, another added. All of them stacked together. Laughter followed. Thabo stepped forward, his jaw tight. Say that again. Saifo placed a hand on his shoulder. Leave it. I won't, Thabo snapped. The other boys leaned in, sensing conflict. What will you do? One challenged. Count us to death. More laughter. Thabo moved before he could stop himself. But Saifo grabbed him firmly. Not like this, he said quietly. The tension held for a moment, then broke as a teacher's voice cut across the yard. Enough. The boys scattered, but the damage remained. That afternoon, the three brothers walked home in silence. Zola watched them from the doorway as they approached. She had learned to read the weight in their steps. Today it was heavy. Come, she said gently. Sit. They did. She waited. It was Saifo who spoke first. They say we are nothing. Zola did not react immediately. What do you think? She asked. Thabo scoffed. I think they are stupid. Lunga remained quiet. Zola looked at him. And you? He hesitated. I think maybe they don't understand us. Zola nodded slowly. That is true. She leaned forward slightly. The world will try to name you before you name yourselves, she said. If you accept those names, they will stay with you. Saifo listened carefully. And if we don't, he asked, then you must build your own. Thabo frowned. How Zola smiled faintly. By becoming something they cannot ignore. The words settled deeply. That evening, something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but with quiet intention. Sifo began to study differently, not just to pass, but to understand. He borrowed old textbooks from a senior student and read them by candlelight long after the others had fallen asleep. Thabo began to observe everything, how vendors priced goods, how people negotiated, how small differences created larger outcomes. He started counting not just numbers, but opportunities. Lunga began to help others more intentionally. He shared what little food they had. He listened when others were hurting. He noticed patterns of pain and quietly tried to ease them. Zola watched all of this with a mixture of pride and concern. They were growing, faster than she expected, faster than she was ready for. Then one afternoon everything changed. The school announced a scholarship exam, a prestigious one. It offered full sponsorship to a top secondary school in the city, education, accommodation, food, everything covered. For students like Sifo, Thabo, and Lunga, it was more than an opportunity. It was a doorway, but it was also a risk, because stepping through it meant leaving everything behind. The announcement spread quickly. Excitement filled the classrooms. Students talked, speculated, dreamed. At home, the three brothers sat together, the weight of the news settling over them. "We should try," Thabo said first. Sifo nodded. "We have to." Lunga looked at Zola. "What do you think?" Mama Zola felt her chest tighten. This was the moment she had always known would come, the moment where love and letting go would collide. "You should take the exam," she said. Her voice was steady, even if her heart was not. Thabo grinned. "We'll pass." Sifo gave a small smile. Lunga remained quiet. That night, Zola did not sleep much. She watched them as they rested, their faces peaceful in a way that made everything feel fragile. If they go, the thought lingered. Will they come back? She pushed it away. Because love, she reminded herself, was not about holding on. It was about preparing someone to stand without you. The weeks leading to the exam were intense. The boys studied whenever they could. After school, before dawn, by candlelight. They shared knowledge, challenged each other, pushed beyond what their environment had ever expected from them. Zola supported them in every way she could. She found extra work, skipped meals, sold more, all to make sure they had time and space to prepare. The day of the exam arrived quietly. No celebration, no ceremony. Just three boys walking out of a small settlement with something larger than themselves in their minds. Zola walked them to the edge of the road. "Remember who you are," she said. Sifo nodded. Thabo smiled. Lunga hugged her tightly. "We will make you proud," he whispered. Zola closed her eyes for a moment. "You already have." They left. The hours that followed felt longer than any Zola had known. She tried to work, tried to focus, but her thoughts stayed with them. Are they okay? Do they understand the questions? Are they afraid? When they finally returned, the sun was already low. They looked tired, but something else was there too. "Hope? How was it?" Zola asked. Sifo exhaled slowly. "Difficult." Thabo shrugged. "But fair." Lunga smiled slightly. "I think we did well." Zola nodded. "That is enough." Days passed. Then a week. Then two. Life continued, but with an undercurrent of anticipation. Every time footsteps approached, Zola looked up. Every time someone called out, her heart lifted, then settled again, until one afternoon, a car appeared. Not common in their area, not ordinary. It stopped near their home. People began to gather. Whispers spread. A man stepped out, dressed neatly, carrying a folder. Zola stood at the doorway, her heart beginning to race. The man approached. "Zola and Lovu?" he asked. "Yes." He opened the folder. "Your sons, Sifo, Thabo, and Lunga." The boys stepped forward. The air seemed to hold still. "They have all been selected." Silence. Then noise. Excitement. Shock. All three. Not one. Not two. All three. Zola felt her knees weaken slightly. She steadied herself against the doorframe. Sifo closed his eyes briefly. Thabo laughed in disbelief. Lunga looked at Zola, only at Zola. And in that look was everything. Joy, gratitude, fear. Because this was not just success, it was departure. A door had opened, and stepping through it would change everything. Zola forced a smile. "You did it," she said. Her voice was strong, even if her heart was breaking quietly beneath it. The news spread through the settlement faster than the wind before a storm. By evening, everyone knew. 3 boys from Zola Nidlovu's shack, 3 boys with no known father, no wealth, no advantage, had all been selected for one of the most prestigious scholarship programs in the city. People gathered outside her home, some curious, some impressed, some quietly envious. 3 of them. That has never happened before. She must be lucky. Or maybe those boys are something special. Zola heard it all. But she did not step outside. Inside the room felt smaller than ever. The boys sat together on the floor, the letter spread between them like something sacred. "We're really going," Thabo said, his voice filled with energy. Sifo nodded, though his expression was more controlled. "Yes." Lunga said nothing. Zola stood by the doorway watching them. Her chest felt tight. Not because she wasn't proud, but because she was. And pride, she was learning, could carry its own kind of pain. "When do we leave?" Thabo asked. Sifo scanned the letter again. "In 5 days." 5. The number echoed in Zola's mind. 5 days to prepare. 5 days to hold on. 5 days before everything changed. That night after the boys fell asleep, Zola sat alone. The candle flickered weakly. The room was quiet. Too quiet. She looked around slowly. The cracked walls, the worn floor, the small bed they had once all shared. Every inch of that space held memories, not just of struggle but of survival, of growth, of love. And now, she would have to let them leave it. Let them leave her. Zola pressed her hands together tightly. "This is what you wanted for them. This is what you worked for. This is what they deserve." The thoughts were true, but truth did not make it easier. The next morning, she began preparing. There was very little to prepare with. No suitcases, no new clothes, no savings to draw from. Only what she could gather. Zola went through everything she owned. She selected the cleanest pieces of clothing for each boy, carefully washed, carefully dried, carefully folded. Each item carried more intention than its value. Then she reached for something she had not touched in years, a small wooden box hidden beneath her bed. Inside were the last things she had kept from her mother, a thin chain, a small cloth, and a folded piece of paper. Zola held the chain in her hand. It was not worth much, but it was the last connection she had to the woman who raised her. She closed her fingers around it, then made a decision. That afternoon she went to the market, not to sell, but to trade. The man behind the stall looked at the chain, then at her. "This is not much," he said. "I know. I can give you very little. That is enough." He handed her the money. Zola took it without hesitation. Some things were too important to hold on to. That evening she returned home with small items: a second-hand bag, a pair of shoes, 3 simple shirts. Nothing impressive, but everything she could give. The boys looked at the items in silence. "You didn't have to do this," Sifo said quietly. Zola smiled faintly. "I did." Thabo picked up the shoes. "These are good." Lunga looked at the bag, then at her. "You sold something," he said. Zola paused, then nodded. It was time. Lunga did not ask more. He understood. The days moved quickly after that, too quickly. Neighbors came to congratulate them, some genuinely, some with curiosity, some with quiet disbelief. Gogo Dlamini came too. She stood in the doorway, her eyes taking everything in. "You did well," she said to the boys. They nodded respectfully. Then she turned to Zola. "You did better." Zola lowered her gaze. "I only did what I could." Gogo shook her head slightly. "You did what many would not." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Gogo reached into her bag and handed Zola a small cloth bundle. "What is this?" Zola asked. "Open it." Inside were a few coins, not many, but enough to matter. "I cannot take this," Zola said. "You can," Gogo replied, "and you will." Zola hesitated, then accepted. "Thank you." Gogo nodded. "Do not thank me. Thank the life you chose. The final night arrived quietly. No celebration, no ceremony. Just 4 people sitting in a small room, aware that something was ending. Zola cooked what she could, a slightly better meal than usual. They ate slowly. No one spoke much. Words felt too small. Afterward, the boys packed their few belongings. Folded clothes, simple items, nothing unnecessary. Zola watched, memorizing everything. The way Sifo moved with calm precision. The way Thabo adjusted things repeatedly, never fully satisfied. The way Lunga paused often as if trying to hold on to the moment. When they were done, they sat together one last time. Zola looked at them. Her boys, not by blood, but by everything that mattered more. "You will go to a place that is different," she said. They listened. "There will be people who have more than you, who have always had more." Thabo smirked slightly. "We already know that." Zola smiled faintly. "Yes, but now you will see it up close." She leaned forward. "Do not let it change how you see yourselves." Sifo nodded. Lunga reached for her hand. "And do not forget where you come from," she continued. "Not because you must stay there, but because it shaped you." Her voice softened. "And do not forget each other." "We won't," Thabo said quickly. Sifo nodded. Lunga squeezed her hand. Zola took a breath. Silence filled the room. Heavy, meaningful. Then slowly she reached into her pocket and pulled out 3 small pieces of folded paper. "I wrote something for each of you," she said. They took them carefully. "Do not open them now." "Why?" Thabo asked. "Because some words are meant for when you need them most." They nodded. The candle burned low. The night deepened. Eventually, one by one, they lay down. Not as children, but not yet fully as men. Zola did not sleep. She watched them, the rise and fall of their chests, the quiet stillness of their rest. She memorized it, because she knew tomorrow everything would change. Morning came too soon. The car arrived. The same man from before stepped out. "It is time," he said. The boys stood, picked up their bags. Zola walked with them to the edge of the road. No crowd this time. No noise. Just the 4 of them. For a moment, no one moved. Then Sifo stepped forward and hugged her. Thabo followed. Then Lunga. Zola held them tightly, longer than usual, as if her arms could somehow delay what was inevitable. "Go," she whispered. They stepped back, turned, and walked toward the car. Zola watched as they got in, as the doors closed, as the engine started, as the vehicle pulled away. She stood there until it disappeared completely. Only then did she allow herself to sit down slowly on the ground. The road was empty. The air was still. For the first time in years, Zola was alone. Silence became Zola's new companion. Not the quiet of rest or the gentle stillness of peace, but the kind of silence that echoed. The kind that reminded her constantly of what used to fill the space. The first morning after the boys left, she woke before dawn out of habit. Her body moved automatically, reaching for the tin, checking for water, preparing for cries that never came. She paused. The room was still. Too still. Zola stood in the center of the shack, her hands hanging loosely at her sides as if waiting for instructions that would never arrive. For a long moment she did nothing. Then she sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. It felt larger now. Emptier. She looked at the corner where Sifo used to sit and read, at the small space near the door where Thabo would leave his things never quite in order, at the wall where Lunga would lean, watching the world outside with quiet curiosity. Every part of the room still held them, but they were gone. Zola exhaled slowly. "This is good," she whispered to herself. "This is what you wanted." The words were true, but they did not fill the space. The days that followed were different. Without the constant demands of caring for 3 growing boys, time stretched in unfamiliar ways. Zola returned to longer hours of work, selling more, moving further, taking on additional laundry jobs. Her body was still tired, but now it was a different kind of tired. Not the exhaustion of giving everything, but the fatigue of having no one to give it to. At the taxi rank, people still recognized her. "That's the woman with the 3 boys," someone said. "The ones who went to the big school, yes. All 3. Zola heard it, but she did not turn. She continued working, quietly, steadily. Occasionally, someone would ask, "Do they send money?" Zola shook her head. "They are still studying." "Do they visit? They just left." "Will they come back?" Zola paused, then answered honestly, I don't know. The truth settled between them. Because hope she was learning was not always certainty. Weeks turned into months. Then came the first letter. It arrived, folded slightly, worn, carried by a young boy from the post office who called her name from outside. Zola Ndlovu. Her heart jumped. She stepped outside quickly. For you, the boy said, handing it over. Zola took it carefully. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. The handwriting was familiar. Sifos. Mama, we are safe. The school is bigger than anything we have seen. There are books everywhere. Real books. Teachers who expect us to answer questions we have never been asked before. It is difficult, but we are learning. Do not worry about us. We are together. We will make you proud. Sifo Zola read it twice, then a third time. Each word settled into her like warmth. She pressed the letter to her chest. They are okay, she whispered. Relief came not loudly but deeply. A few days later, another letter arrived. Thabos. Mama, you would laugh if you saw this place. Everything is organized. Too organized. People here think they understand the world, but they don't know what it means to build something from nothing. I am learning things they never had to learn. And I will use it. One day we will change everything. Thabozola smiled faintly. Still stubborn, she murmured. Then came Lunga's. Mama, there are many people here, but sometimes it feels lonely. Not because we are alone, but because they don't understand where we come from. I remember everything you taught us. I try to see people the way you do. I miss you. Lunga Zola's eyes filled. I miss you too, she whispered softly. The letters became her anchor. They came irregularly, sometimes weeks apart, sometimes longer, but each one carried a piece of them back to her. She kept them all, folded carefully, stored in the same wooden box where she once kept her mother's belongings. Now it held a new kind of inheritance. Their words, their growth, their becoming. But not all days were filled with comfort. There were gaps, long ones, times when no letters came, times when silence returned heavier than before. During those moments, doubt crept in. Are they too busy? Have they changed? Have they forgotten? Zola never said the thoughts out loud, but they lived quietly inside her. One evening, as she returned from work, she saw something unusual. A group of children gathered near her shack. They were younger, ragged, hungry. One of them stepped forward. Ma'am, he said hesitantly, do you have anything to eat? Zola paused. She looked at them, then at the small bag in her hand, inside just enough for her own meal. For a moment she hesitated. Then she remembered. 3 babies. A storm. A decision. She opened the bag. Come, she said. They followed her inside. She divided the food. Small portions, not enough to satisfy fully, but enough to matter. The children ate quickly, quietly, gratefully. Zola watched them. Something inside her shifted. She could not care for her boys the same way anymore. But that part of her, the part that gave that, held that, protected it, had not disappeared. It had only changed direction. From that day on, Zola began to do small things, sharing food when she could, helping when she saw need, not because she had enough, but because she understood what it meant to have nothing. Time continued its quiet march forward. The boys grew. Though she did not see it, she felt it in their words, in the way they wrote, in the thoughts they shared. They were becoming something beyond the limits of the life she had known. And Zola was becoming something too. Not just a mother, but a foundation, a beginning, a quiet force that had set 3 lives in motion. One afternoon, months later, a letter arrived. Different, thicker. Zola opened it slowly. Inside were 3 smaller envelopes, one from each of them. She read Sifo's first. Mama, we are not the same boys who left, but we are still yours. Everything we learn, everything we become, started with you. Her hands trembled slightly. She opened Thabo's. Mama, you taught us how to survive. Now we are learning how to build. And one day, we will build something for you. Her breath caught. Then Lunga's. Mama, no matter how far we go, we carry you with us. Always. Zola closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her face. Not from sadness. Not entirely. but from something deeper, something fuller, a quiet understanding that what she had given had not been lost. It was growing, far from her, beyond her reach, but still connected, still alive, still returning, in ways she could not yet fully see. Years passed the way seasons do in a place where survival matters more than calendars, quietly, steadily, without ceremony. Zola no longer counted them. She counted changes instead, the deepening lines on her hands, the slower rise from her bed in the mornings, the way her back ached after carrying water even when the buckets were only half full. Time had not been gentle with her, but it had not broken her either. By now, Zola had become a familiar figure beyond her settlement. People knew her not just as the woman who once raised 3 boys alone, but as someone who could be trusted. If a child went missing for a few hours, someone would say, "Check with Zola." If an old woman needed help getting food, someone would say, "Zola will know what to do." If a stranger needed direction, kindness, or even just someone to listen, they would often end up at her door. Her shack had changed too. Not in size, not in structure, but in purpose. Where once it had held only survival, now it held quiet refuge. A broken stool near the door for visitors. A small container where she kept extra food for those who needed it more than she did. A corner where children sometimes sat listening to her speak in the same calm, steady voice she once used with Sifo, Thabo, and Lunga. Zola had built something, not with money, but with presence. And still, every night before she slept, she opened the wooden box. The letters were there, carefully folded, worn at the edges. She read them often, not because she had forgotten their words, but because reading them made the distance feel smaller. The boys had changed. That much was clear. Their handwriting had become sharper, their thoughts deeper, their language more precise. They wrote about things Zola had never experienced: laboratories, technology, investments, systems. Words that once would have meant nothing to her now carried weight, because they came from them, from her boys. Sifo wrote about medical innovation. He described machines that could detect illness, early systems that could help communities like theirs receive care before it was too late. Mama, one letter read, "I am learning how to fix what we could not fix before." Zola had held that letter for a long time. Thabo wrote differently. His letters were sharper, focused. Mama, money is not just something people have or don't have. It is something that moves, and I am learning how to control where it goes. Zola didn't fully understand, but she felt the intention behind it, and Lunga Lunga's letters always carried something else, a quiet reflection. Mama, there are many people here who have everything but still feel empty. I think it is because they do not know how to care for others. Zola smiled when she read that, because she knew that part of him had not changed. Years passed, and then, one day, the letters stopped. Not suddenly, not with warning, but gradually. First a delay, then longer gaps, then silence. Zola noticed. Of course she did, but she did not panic, not immediately. She told herself they were busy, that their lives had grown larger, that time had simply stretched. Weeks passed, then months. Still no letters. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. Heavier, uncertain. Zola sat outside her shack one evening watching the sky fade into darkness. Her hands rested in her lap. Still, unmoving. They are fine, she told herself. They must be, but the absence of their words created space. And in that space, doubt began to grow. Have they moved on? Have they become part of a world where I no longer belong? Zola closed her eyes briefly. The thoughts hurt, not because she believed them fully, but because they were possible. The next morning she went to the post office. A rare trip, one she had not needed to make before. The man behind the counter looked up. "Yes, I am looking for letters," Zola said. He checked, then shook his head. "Nothing for you." Zola nodded. "Thank you." She turned to leave, then paused. "Have there been any before?" she asked. He glanced at a list. "Yes, but not recently." Zola nodded again. That was all. She walked back slowly. The road felt longer than usual. When she reached her shack, she sat down inside. The room felt familiar, but emptier than before. She looked at the wooden box, then reached for it, opened it. The letters were still there. Proof that what she had lived, what she had given, what they had shared was real. Not imagined, not forgotten. just distant. That evening, as she prepared a small meal, there was a knock at her door. Zola stood, opened it. Not one she recognized. "Are you Zola Ndlovu?" he asked. "Yes." He handed her an envelope. "This came for you." Zola took it carefully. "Thank you." The boy nodded and left. Zola closed the door slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was not a letter, but a printed card. Clean, sharp, different from anything she had ever held. She read it once, then again. "You are cordially invited." Her breath caught. It was an invitation to a major event in the city, a foundation launch, a name she did not recognize, a place she had never been, a world she had never entered. Zola frowned slightly. This must be a mistake. She turned the card over. Her name was printed clearly. Zola Ndlovu. No mistake. She looked closer. There was no explanation, no note, no indication of who had sent it. Only the details. Date, time, location. Zola sat down slowly. Her mind began to turn. Why me? She had no connection to such events, no reason to be invited, no place among people like that. And yet, the card was real. Her name was there. The invitation was intentional. Zola held it in her hands for a long time. Something stirred inside her. Not certainty, not understanding, but a quiet sense that this, whatever it was connected to them, to the silence, to the years that had passed. She didn't know how, but she felt it. Zola placed the card inside the wooden box, then paused, and took it out again. This time she didn't hide it. She placed it on the small table near her bed, where she could see it, where she could think. The days leading up to the event felt different, not urgent, but charged. Zola found herself wondering, not just about the invitation, but about everything. About the boys, about who they had become, about whether the path she had helped start was now circling back. She stood outside one evening, watching the road, the same road where she had once said goodbye, the same road where everything had changed. And now, something was coming. She didn't know what, but she knew one thing clearly. The story she thought had ended had not ended at all. The invitation did not leave Zola's mind. It sat there quiet, persistent, like a question waiting to be answered. For days, she carried on with her routine, but something inside her had shifted. Every task felt slightly distant, as if her body was present, but her thoughts were elsewhere. At the market, she fried vetkuek the same way she always had. The oil hissed, the dough rose, customers came and went, but her attention drifted. "What are you thinking about?" Nomsa asked one afternoon, watching her closely. Zola blinked, returning to the moment. "Nothing," Nomsa snorted. "That face is not nothing." Zola hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out the invitation card. Nomsa took it, her eyebrows lifting as she read. This is not small," she said. "I know. Do you know who sent it?" Zola shook her head. "No." Nomsa looked at her again, more seriously this time. "Then why would they invite you?" Zola had asked herself that question many times. "I don't know," she repeated. Nomsa handed the card back slowly. "You should go." Zola frowned. "I don't belong in places like that." Nomsa leaned closer. "Maybe not," before she said, "but something has changed." Zola didn't respond, because she didn't know if she believed that. That night, she sat alone again, the invitation resting on the table. She traced the edges of it with her fingers. Clean, smooth, unfamiliar. It didn't feel like her world, but something about it refused to let her dismiss it. The next morning, Zola made a decision. Not a loud one, not a confident one, but a step. She would go. The problem was, she had nothing to wear. Her clothes were clean but worn, faded, mended too many times. They carried her life in them, but not the kind of life expected at an event like the one described on the card. Zola stood in front of her small collection of clothes, studying them carefully. "This will not work," she murmured. She considered not going again, but the thought no longer settled the same way. It felt like avoiding something important. So she did what she had always done, When faced with something she didn't have, she found a way. Zola went to see Gogo Dlamini. The older woman listened quietly as Zola explained. "You think it is from them?" Gogo asked. Zola hesitated. "I don't know." Gogo nodded slowly. "Then you must go." Zola sighed. "With what I cannot walk into that place like this." Gogo stood up without another word and disappeared into the back of her small home. When she returned, she carried something folded carefully in her hands. She placed it in Zola's arms. Zola unfolded it slowly. A dress. Simple, but elegant in a way Zola had never owned. It was not new, but it was well kept. Soft fabric, clean lines, dignified. Zola looked up, surprised. "I cannot take this." Gogo raised an eyebrow. "You can. It is too much." Gogo shook her head. "It is exactly enough." Zola hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Gogo's expression softened slightly. "Go and see what life is trying to show you." The day of the event arrived quietly. Zola dressed slowly, carefully. She washed her face, tied her hair neatly, put on the dress. It fit better than she expected. Not perfectly, but enough. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror. For a moment she didn't recognize what she saw, not because she looked different, but because she felt different, like she was stepping into something unknown. Zola took a deep breath, then stepped outside. The journey to the city felt longer than usual. Every passing building, every clean street, every polished surface reminded her of how far she had traveled, not just in distance, but in life. When she arrived at the venue, she stopped. It was overwhelming, large, bright, filled with people who looked like they belonged. Men in tailored suits, women in elegant dresses, cars lined neatly outside, security stationed at every entrance. Zola stood at the edge for a moment. The invitation felt heavy in her hand. You can still turn back. The thought came clearly. It would be easy. No one here knew her. No one expected her. She could leave and nothing would change. But something inside her resisted. You did not come this far to stop at the door. Zola walked forward. Each step felt deliberate, measured, uncertain but determined. She approached the entrance. A security guard stepped in front of her. "Invitation," he said. Zola handed it over. He looked at it, then at her. His expression changed slightly. Not respect, not yet, but something else. Doubt. "You are Zola Nidlovu?" he asked. "Yes." He looked at her again, taking in the dress, the shoes, the way she carried herself. Something didn't match his expectations. "You should wait," he said. Zola frowned. Wait for what? For confirmation. Confirmation of what he didn't answer immediately. Just wait. Zola felt the familiar sensation, the one she knew too well. Being questioned, measured, placed somewhere lower before being allowed to move forward. She straightened slightly. "My name is on the invitation," she said calmly. "I understand," he replied. But what?" Before he could answer, another voice interrupted. "Is there a problem?" A woman in a sharp uniform approached, confident, composed. The guard turned. "She says she is Zola Nidlovu." The woman looked at the card, then at Zola. Her expression shifted instantly. Respect, clear, immediate. "Yes," she said. "She is expected." The guard stepped back. Zola felt the shift, subtle, but undeniable. The woman turned to her. "Please come with me." Zola nodded slowly. She stepped inside. The air changed. Cooler, softer. The noise was controlled conversations instead of chaos. Zola walked carefully, aware of every movement. People glanced at her. Some curious, some indifferent. None recognizing her. Not yet. The woman guided her through the space. "To the main hall," she said. Zola nodded. Her heart began to beat faster. Not from fear, but from anticipation. Because something was coming. She could feel it. They reached a large set of doors. The woman paused. "You can go in now." Zola looked at her. "Thank you." Then she turned and stepped inside. The room was filled with people. Rows of seats, a stage, lights, everything prepared, everything waiting. Zola moved slowly, carefully. She found a place near the back. sat down, her hands resting quietly in her lap. She looked around. Still no answers. Still no explanation. But one thing was clear: she was not here by accident, and whatever was about to happen would change everything. Zola sat still, but nothing inside her was calm. The room felt too polished, too ordered, like a place where everything had already been decided before anyone even spoke. The air carried the low hum of quiet conversations, the kind that did not rise into laughter but stayed controlled, measured, practiced. She folded her hands tighter in her lap. People around her looked comfortable. She did not. And yet she did not leave. On the stage, a large screen displayed the name of the foundation hosting the event. The letters were bold, modern, unfamiliar. Beneath it, smaller words scrolled slowly, phrases about innovation, impact, and transformation. Zola read them, but they did not fully settle. Her world had never been described in such language. She had known hunger, loss, survival, endurance, not impact, not transformation. Still, something in her chest tightened, because deep down she understood somewhere, somehow. Those words were connected to her story too. The lights dimmed slightly, a quiet signal. The event was about to begin. Zola straightened in her seat. A man stepped onto the stage, well-dressed, composed, carrying himself with the ease of someone used to being heard. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and steady. "Thank you for being here today." Applause followed. Zola did not clap. She watched, listened. The man spoke about the foundation, its mission, its vision, its purpose. To create opportunity where none existed, he said. To build systems that support those who have been forgotten. To invest in lives that others overlooked. The words echoed through the hall. Zola felt something stir, because she knew what it meant to be overlooked, to be unseen, to be left behind. The speaker continued. "This foundation was not built from theory," he said. "It was built from experience." Zola's eyes narrowed slightly. Experience. What kind of experience leads to something like this? The man paused, then smiled. "And now, I would like to introduce the individuals behind it." The room shifted. Attention sharpened. Zola's heart began to beat faster. The man stepped aside. The lights dimmed further. Then, the doors at the side of the stage opened. 3 figures walked in. Zola's breath caught, not because she recognized them immediately, but because something about them felt familiar. They walked with confidence, not arrogance, not display, but certainty. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and where you are going. The first was tall, composed, his gaze steady. The second moved with quiet calculation, his eyes observing everything. The third carried a softer presence, but no less powerful. The audience applauded, loudly, respectfully. Zola stared. Her mind tried to make sense of what she was seeing, but it wasn't ready yet. Not fully, not clearly. The man on stage spoke again. "Please welcome Sifo Dlamini Thabo Nkosi and Lunga Maseko." The names landed. Zola's heart skipped. Sifo, Thabo, Lunga. The world seemed to tilt slightly, but her mind resisted. No, it couldn't be. Not like this. Not here. The 3 men took their positions. The first Sifo stepped forward. He began to speak. His voice was calm, measured, strong. "We stand here today not as individuals," he said, "but as a result of something greater than ourselves." Zola leaned forward slightly. There was something in his voice. Something she knew. Something she had heard before years ago in a much smaller room. He continued. "There was a time when we had nothing. The room grew quieter. When we were not expected to survive, let alone succeed." Zola's chest tightened. Her fingers curled slightly. The words felt closer now, more specific, more real. Sifo glanced briefly at his brothers, then back at the audience. "But we were given something rare." Thabo stepped forward next. "Not money," he said. "Not opportunity. Not advantage." He paused. "Something far more powerful." Zola's breathing slowed. Her eyes did not move. Lunga stepped forward. "A choice," he said softly. "A choice made by someone who had nothing, but still chose to give everything." The room was silent now. Fully. Completely. Zola felt it. The moment. The shift. The connection forming but not yet fully revealed. Sifo spoke again. We built this foundation to do what was done for us. To reach those who have been left behind. To invest in lives others might ignore. Thabo added, to prove that where you begin does not define where you end. Lunga's voice softened further. But more importantly, he paused, then looked out across the room, not scanning, not searching, but knowing, to honor the person who made it possible. Zola's heart stopped for a moment. The air felt heavier, thicker, like something was about to break through. Sifo stepped forward again. There is someone here today. Zola froze. Her hands tightened. She didn't move. Couldn't. Thabo continued. Someone who does not see herself as important, Lunga added. Someone who believes she only did what she had to do. Sifo's voice deepened. But we are here because of her. The room shifted. People began to look around, searching, curious. Zola's breath became shallow. A quiet instinct rose inside her. Stand up. But she didn't. She stayed still, hidden in plain sight. Lunga spoke again. She carried us, when she could barely carry herself. Zola's eyes filled. Thabo continued. She chose us, when the world had already abandoned us. Sifo finished. She gave us everything, without expecting anything in return. The silence in the room became something else now. Not empty, not passive, but charged. Zola felt it in her chest, in her throat, in the space between memory and realization. Lunga looked directly toward the back of the room. Toward her. Zola Ndlovu, he said gently. The name echoed. Not loudly, but clearly. Zola's body went still. Completely still. The room turned. Heads shifted. Eyes searched and then found her. She felt it. All of it. The attention. The recognition. The weight of a moment she had never imagined. Sifo spoke again. Please. His voice softened. Come forward. Zola didn't move. Not immediately, because everything inside her was trying to catch up, trying to understand, trying to accept what her heart had already begun to feel. Thabo stepped closer to the edge of the stage. We've been looking for you, he said. Lunga added softly, we never stopped. Zola's breath trembled. Her hands slowly released their grip, and for the first time since she entered the room she understood. They had not forgotten. They had been finding their way back. For a moment Zola could not stand. Her body felt rooted to the chair as if the years themselves were holding her in place. Years of carrying, of waiting, of learning to live without expecting anything to return. The room watched. Hundreds of eyes. Silent. Curious. Uncertain. But Zola heard none of it. All she could hear was her own heartbeat and the echo of three voices she had once known as small, fragile, and entirely dependent on her. Now those voices stood on a stage, calling her forward. Zola Ndlovu. The name still lingered in the air. She placed her hands on the sides of the chair and slowly pushed herself up. Her legs trembled not from weakness, but from the weight of what this moment carried. Every step toward the aisle felt unreal. The distance between her seat and the stage was not far, but it stretched across years, across sacrifice, across nights of hunger, days of doubt, moments where she had chosen to stay when leaving would have been easier. People moved slightly to let her pass. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with dawning recognition. A few, those who understood the story even before it was fully told, watched her with something deeper. Respect. Zola kept walking. Her gaze never left the stage, never left them. Sifo, Thabo, Lunga, now men, but still hers. As she reached the front, she paused. The steps leading up to the stage stood before her, simple but symbolic. She placed one foot on the first step, then the next, and then she was there, standing in front of them, close enough now to see the details, the lines of their faces, the strength in their posture, the quiet emotion in their eyes. Time collapsed. For a brief moment they were not men, they were boys again, standing in a small room, looking up at her, waiting. Zola's lips parted slightly, but no words came. She didn't know what to say, didn't know where to begin. Sifo stepped forward first. He stopped just a step away from her, close enough but not yet touching. as if asking permission without words. "Hello, Mama," he said softly. The word broke something inside her. Not painfully, but deeply. Zola's breath shook. She reached out. Her hand hovered for a second, then rested gently against his face. Real. Warm. Not imagined. "You came back," she whispered. Sifo nodded. "We always were." Thabo stepped forward next. He smiled, but it was different from the boy she remembered. Stronger, more controlled, but still carrying the same fire. "You thought we forgot?" he asked quietly. Zola shook her head. "I didn't know what to think." Lunga closed the distance. He didn't speak immediately. He simply stepped into her arms. And that was enough. Zola held him. Tightly, the way she had held him when he was small, fragile, needing her. Now he was taller, stronger. But in that moment he leaned into her the same way, and she held him the same way. They stood together, not separated by years, not defined by absence, but reunited by something that had never broken. The room erupted into applause, loud, emotional, uncontrolled. But Zola barely heard it. Her world had narrowed to this, to them, to the truth standing in front of her. After a moment, Sifo gently pulled back. He turned slightly toward the audience. "Everything we are," he said, began with her. Zola lowered her gaze slightly, uncomfortable with the attention, but unable to deny the truth of what he was saying. Thabo stepped forward. "There was no system that saved us," he said. "No program. No opportunity waiting." He paused. There was just one person who chose not to walk away. The audience grew quieter, listening more closely now, understanding more deeply. Lunga spoke next. "She found us when we had nothing." Zola's eyes filled. She stayed, when everything told her to leave. Sifo continued. "She gave us food when she had none." Thabo added, "She gave us dignity when the world tried to take it." Lunga finished, "She gave us a future, before we even knew what that meant." The room held stillness again. But this time it was not curiosity. It was recognition. Zola stood quietly beside them, not trying to take the moment, not trying to claim anything. Because for her, this was never about recognition. It was about choice. And she had already made hers years ago. Sifo turned back to her. "We've spent years building something," he said, "not just for ourselves." Zola looked at him, listening. "For people like us," Thabo added. "For those who are still where we started," Lunga said. Sifo nodded. "This foundation," he gestured to the space around them, "is not just a project. It's a promise," Thabo said. "A continuation," Lunga added. Zola felt something settle inside her, a quiet understanding. This was what those years had become. Not just success, not just escape, but return, in a different form, on a different scale, but still rooted in the same place. Sifo reached into his pocket. He pulled out a document, folded, carefully. He held it out to her. Zola hesitated. "What is this?" she asked. "Something that belongs to you," he said. Zola took it slowly. Her hands moved with care as if the paper itself might carry weight beyond what she could see. She unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the page. The words were formal, structured, legal, but the meaning was clear. Ownership, recognition. Her name, Zola Nidlovu, attached to something far larger than anything she had ever imagined. She looked up, confused, overwhelmed. "I don't understand," she said. Thabo smiled slightly. "You don't have to." Lunga stepped closer. "We built this," he said gently, "but it started with you." Sifo finished. "So it belongs to you too." Zola shook her head. "I didn't do this." Sifo met her gaze. "You did the part that mattered most." Silence. Then, something deeper than words. Understanding. Acceptance. Not of the scale, not of the wealth, but of the connection, of the line that ran from a broken clinic. To this stage, Zola looked at them again. Really looked. And this time, she didn't see the boys she had raised. She saw the men they had become. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel it fully, not just pride, but peace, because what she had given had not been lost. It had grown, and now it had come back. For a moment, Zola could not breathe. Not because something was wrong, but because everything had changed. The document in her hands felt heavier than paper. It carried years she had never expected to be seen, let alone honored in front of a room like this. She looked down again. Her name was there. Clear. Undeniable. Zola Ndlovu. For so long, that name had existed quietly attached to struggle, to survival, to a life lived on the edge of being overlooked. Now, it stood at the center of something powerful. She lifted her gaze slowly. The room was still watching, but this time the eyes felt different, not questioning, not dismissing, but recognizing. Zola swallowed. "I didn't do this for anything in return," she said softly. Her voice carried not loudly but deeply. "I didn't even know if you would live, let alone stand here like this." The audience listened. Fully, completely. She looked at Sifo. "I only saw 3 children who needed someone." Her eyes moved to Thabo. "I didn't think about the future." Then to Lunga. "I just stayed." Because they were simple. And because they were true. Sifo nodded slowly. "And that is why we are here," he said. Thabo stepped closer. "You gave without expecting," he added. Lunga's voice softened. "So now we give because of you." Zola felt her chest tighten. Not from pain, but from something she had never allowed herself to fully feel before being seen, not as someone who endured, but as someone who mattered. Sifo turned slightly toward the audience again. "There are many stories like ours," he said. "Children left behind, families broken, lives dismissed before they even begin." Thabo continued. "People think change comes from systems, from policies, from resources." He shook his head slightly. "But sometimes," Lunga finished, "it comes from one person who refuses to walk away." The words landed, not as a statement, but as a truth. Zola stood quietly beside them. She did not interrupt. She did not step forward. Because she didn't need to. Her life had already spoken. Sifo gestured toward the large screen behind them. The lights shifted. Images appeared. Not polished. Not staged. But real. A broken building. An abandoned corridor. A basket. 3 small shapes wrapped in cloth. Zola's breath caught. The clinic. That night. The moment everything began. The room reacted. Gasps. Whispers. Recognition spreading like a slow wave. Then more images. A small shack. A young woman holding 3 infants. Worn clothes. Tired eyes. Steady hands. Zola watched. Frozen. Because she had never seen herself like that. From the outside. From a distance. Through someone else's eyes. The screen shifted again. 3 boys. Growing. Learning. Standing together. Then 3 young men. Graduating. Working. Building. Zola's vision blurred slightly. Not from confusion, but from emotion. Because the story was not just being told, it was being honored. When the screen went dark, the room remained silent for a moment. Then applause. Not loud at first, but growing, stronger, deeper, until it filled the entire space. Zola stood in the middle of it, not moving, not reacting outwardly, but inside, everything shifted. Sifo turned back to her. "There is one more thing," he said. Zola looked at him. "What else could there be?" she asked softly. Thabo smiled slightly. "This foundation," he paused, "is named after you." Zola blinked. She hadn't noticed before, hadn't fully read, hadn't connected. Lunga stepped closer. "The Zola Ndlovu Foundation," he said gently. The name settled. Deep, permanent. Zola felt her knees weaken slightly. Not from shock, but from the weight of meaning. Her name attached to something that would outlive her. Something that would reach people she would never meet. Something that would continue long after this moment ended. "I don't," she began. But the words didn't come. Sifo placed a hand over hers. "You don't have to understand everything right now," he said. "Just know this," Thabo continued. "You changed our lives." Lunga finished. "And now that change will reach others." Zola looked at them. Her boys. Not boys anymore, but still hers. She took a slow breath, then another, and then, for the first time, since stepping onto that stage, she smiled, not out of politeness, not out of habit, but from something real, something full. The applause continued, but Zola no longer felt overwhelmed by it. She stood in it, grounded, present, whole, because this moment was not about wealth, or success, or recognition. It was about something far more powerful. The quiet truth that one decision made in a broken place on a storm-filled night had grown into something no one could have predicted. Zola turned slightly, looking out at the audience, at the faces, at the world that had once overlooked her. And she did not feel small. Not anymore. Because she understood something now. Something she had lived, but never fully seen. What she had done had always mattered, even when no one was watching, and now the world was. The applause did not end quickly. It rose, fell, and rose again like waves that refused to retreat. People stood, some wiping their eyes, others simply staring at the stage as if they were witnessing something rare. Zola remained still in the center of it all, not because she wanted the attention, but because she was still absorbing what it meant. For years, her life had moved in small circles between survival and sacrifice, between giving and enduring. Nothing about it had ever felt large enough to be seen by a room like this. And yet, here she was, not as a guest, not as an outsider, but as the reason. Saifo stepped forward once more. His voice, when he spoke again, carried something deeper than confidence. It carried gratitude. "We did not bring our mother here today just to honor her," he said. Zola glanced at him. "We brought her here to return what was always hers." The room quieted again. Thabo moved beside him, holding another document thicker, this time more formal. "This foundation," he said, "is not just named after her." He paused. "It is owned by her." A ripple passed through the audience. Zola turned toward him, her eyes widening slightly. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice low. Lunga stepped closer, his tone gentle but steady. "We built it," he said, "but it belongs to you." Zola shook her head instinctively. "No, I don't." Sifo placed a hand over hers again. "You gave us a life," he said. "This is how we give something back." Zola looked down at the document. Legal terms, signatures, assets, numbers she could not fully comprehend but understood in scale. It wasn't just money. It was structure, power, responsibility, a future. "I don't know how to run something like this," she admitted. Her honesty was immediate, unfiltered. Thabo smiled faintly. "You already have," he said. Zola frowned slightly. "I have," Lunga nodded. "You built us," he said. "From nothing." Silence followed, because the truth in that statement did not need explanation. Saifo added, "This foundation is not about management. It's about purpose." Zola looked at them again, her mind still catching up, her heart already there. "What happens now?" she asked. Saifo took a slow breath. "Now, we build something bigger." He turned toward the audience. "For every child who was left behind," Thabo continued, "for every mother who carried more than she should have had to." Lunga finished, "For every life that was overlooked." Zola felt something shift again, not in the room, but inside her, because this was not an ending. It was a beginning, a different kind of life, one she had never imagined, but one that now stood in front of her, waiting. Saifo looked back at her. "We don't expect you to do this alone," he said. Thabo nodded. "We will be with you," Lunga added softly, "just like you were with us." Zola's eyes filled again, but this time, she didn't try to hide it. She let it come, because there was no shame in it, only truth. She took a step forward, not toward the audience, but toward them. And then, she pulled them into her arms, all three, at once, just like she had years ago. But now, they were taller, stronger. Their presence filled the space in a different way. And yet, in that embrace, nothing had changed. They leaned into her, and she held them. The room faded, the noise softened. Because in that moment, there was only this. A circle completed. A story returned. After a while, Zola pulled back. She looked at them carefully, as if seeing them fully for the first time, not as boys she had raised, but as men who had chosen to come back. You didn't have to do all this, she said softly. Sifo smiled. Yes, we did. Thabo added. You taught us not to walk away. Lunga finished. So we didn't. Zola let out a quiet breath, then nodded. Acceptance. Not just of what they had done, but of what it meant. The host returned to the stage, briefly guiding the event forward. There were speeches, formalities, announcements about programs, outreach funding. But Zola did not focus on those details. She listened, but more than that, she felt, because everything now carried a different meaning. Every plan, every promise, every future step was connected to something she had lived. When the event ended, people approached her, some with admiration, some with curiosity, some with respect. They spoke to her differently now, listened differently, treated her differently. But Zola remained the same. She answered simply, listened carefully, stood quietly, because she understood something they did not. Nothing about her value had changed, only their awareness of it. Later, outside the building, the evening air felt cooler, calmer, the noise of the event behind them, the city stretching out ahead. Sifo stood beside her. Are you okay? He asked. Zola nodded slowly. I think so. Thabo joined them. This is only the beginning, he said. Lunga smiled gently. And we are here. Zola looked at them, then out at the city, lights glowing, movement everywhere. So much life, so many stories, and somewhere among them, children still waiting, just like they had been. She took a deep breath, then spoke quietly. Then we start tomorrow. The three of them smiled, because that was the Zola they knew. Not waiting, not hesitating, moving forward. Always. And for the first time in a long time, Zola did not feel like she was catching up to life. She felt like she was stepping into it, fully, with everything she had been, and everything she was about to become. Sometimes the world teaches us that only big actions matter, wealth, power, recognition. But this story reminds us of something deeper. Real change often begins quietly, with a single decision, a single act of kindness, a single moment where someone chooses not to walk away. Zola did not have money. She did not have influence. She did not have certainty. But she had something far more powerful. She stayed. And in staying, she changed 3 lives. And those 3 lives changed the world around them. We don't always see the impact of what we do. Not immediately. Not clearly. But that does not mean it isn't growing. Some seeds take years to return as something beautiful. If this story touched you, take a moment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this matter, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because somewhere out there, another story is waiting to be told.